Hi everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. My name is Anna. Today I have a new story for you, called The Balcony Terrarium. It's about a stressed city worker who discovers an unexpected way to slow down, and finds herself falling in love with something she once found genuinely terrifying. As always, just relax and listen, and let's begin. Mia Chen was 29 years old, working long hours as a corporate accountant at a busy financial firm downtown. Her days blurred together in a constant rush of spreadsheets, client calls, and deadlines that seemed to multiply no matter how quickly she worked through them. She lived alone in a small apartment with a narrow balcony overlooking a quiet street, rarely finding time to properly relax, let alone develop any meaningful hobbies outside her demanding career. Everything shifted during a weekend visit to her college friend Julia's house, located in a quieter suburb about an hour outside the city. Julia had recently taken up an unusual hobby, keeping pet tarantulas, maintaining a small collection of glass enclosures in a spare room, and she enthusiastically insisted on showing Mia her collection during the visit. Mia had always felt a deep, instinctive fear of spiders, developed after finding a large one in her childhood bedroom, hiding behind a curtain near her bed. She still remembered that night clearly, even years later, waking up to use the bathroom, flipping on the light, and seeing the dark shape motionless against the pale fabric, close enough that she could see its legs. She had screamed loudly enough to wake the entire house, and though her father had calmly removed it moments later, the fear that followed lasted considerably longer, shaping her instinctive reaction to anything with too many legs for the rest of her childhood and well into adulthood. The mere sight of a spider, even a tiny one in the corner of a room, was usually enough to send her into a slight panic. She initially refused to get anywhere near Julia's spare room, watching nervously from the doorway as her friend calmly reached into an enclosure, seemingly completely unbothered. The late afternoon light filtered softly through the curtains, the quiet hum of the house feeling worlds away from Mia's usual hectic city environment, yet her attention remained fixed anxiously on the glass tanks lined along the far wall. "They're honestly not dangerous at all, and they'd much rather hide than attack," Julia explained patiently, noticing Mia's obvious discomfort. "Most people's fear comes from misunderstanding them completely. Come closer, just a little. I promise you're safe." Reluctantly, encouraged by Julia's calm confidence, Mia took a few hesitant steps closer, her heart pounding rapidly. Julia carefully lifted the lid of one enclosure, showing Mia the calm, slow-moving creature inside, a fist-sized tarantula with soft, reddish hairs covering its legs, barely moving as it rested on a bed of soil beneath a small piece of bark. "This one's a Chilean rose hare," Julia explained. "One of the calmest species out there. Beginners usually start with one like her." Despite her initial terror, Mia found herself unexpectedly fascinated, leaning in slightly closer to observe the slow, deliberate movements within the tank. "It's actually kind of beautiful," she admitted quietly, surprising herself with this reaction. "Most people say that eventually," Julia said, smiling knowingly. "Once you understand what's actually happening, the fear usually transforms into something closer to respect, sometimes even genuine fascination." That weekend planted an unexpected seed in Mia's mind. Driving back to the city that Sunday evening, she found herself unable to stop thinking about the quiet, patient creature in the glass tank, researching invertebrate ownership regulations on her phone during the entire train ride home, discovering, somewhat surprisingly, that keeping tarantulas in apartments was completely legal and increasingly popular among people living in small city spaces. Over the following weeks, Mia's curiosity gradually developed into serious consideration. She researched extensively online, read several beginner care guides, and eventually discovered a local invertebrate keepers society that offered introductory workshops specifically for people interested in keeping their first tarantula. She spent several evenings reading through forums where experienced keepers shared their own stories, discovering she wasn't nearly as alone in this unusual interest as she initially assumed. Many shared similar stories of overcoming childhood fears, of transforming stressful city lives through the calming, methodical rhythm of caring for a slow, quiet animal. One particular post, written by a keeper in a city much larger and busier than Mia's own, described the hobby as finally learning to slow down enough to actually watch something instead of rushing past it, a phrase that stayed with Mia for days afterward, capturing something she hadn't quite been able to put into words herself. She also purchased 2 beginner care guides, reading them cover to cover within a single week, highlighting sections about enclosure setup, feeding schedules, and common beginner mistakes to avoid. Though the reading alone couldn't fully replace hands-on experience, it gave Mia a foundation of vocabulary and basic understanding that made her later workshop considerably easier to follow. Despite her research, Mia still felt considerable hesitation about actually committing to the hobby. Her fear of spiders, though somewhat softened by her experience at Julia's house, hadn't disappeared entirely. She mentioned her interest hesitantly to a few coworkers, most of whom reacted with a mixture of confusion and mild alarm. "You want to keep what, in your apartment?" her coworker Ben asked incredulously during a lunch break. "Isn't that incredibly risky, living right next to something like that?" "Apparently it's much safer than people assume," Mia explained, though she still felt slightly uncertain herself. "Experienced keepers do it successfully all over the world, even in tiny apartments like mine." Despite the skepticism from colleagues, Mia decided to attend an introductory workshop offered by the local Invertebrate Society, held one Saturday afternoon at a community center downtown. The session was led by an experienced keeper named Marcus, a retired exotic pet store owner who had kept tarantulas for over 15 years and now dedicated much of his free time teaching newcomers. Marcus's calm, patient teaching style immediately put Mia somewhat at ease. He began the session discussing tarantula biology and behavior in accessible, engaging detail, gradually working toward practical demonstrations using several of the community center's own resident tarantulas. "Fear usually comes from unfamiliarity," Marcus told the small group of nervous beginners, echoing almost exactly what Julia had told Mia weeks earlier. "The more you understand them, the less frightening they become, and the more fascinating they become instead." During the practical demonstration, Mia found herself standing directly beside an open enclosure for the first time in her life, without her friend Julia's reassuring presence beside her. Her hands trembled slightly as Marcus guided her through carefully coaxing a calm tarantula onto a small plastic tray, but remarkably, she managed to complete the task without panicking completely. "You did wonderfully," Marcus told her afterward, genuinely encouraging. Most people struggle much more during their first hands-on experience. Over the following weeks of the course, Marcus guided the small group through a comprehensive curriculum covering the essential foundations of responsible tarantula keeping. One session focused entirely on recognizing signs of a healthy, thriving animal versus warning signs of potential problems, teaching Mia and her classmates how to properly read the subtle clues within an enclosure, from webbing patterns to feeding responses. Another session covered the molting process in detail, explaining how tarantulas periodically shed their entire exoskeleton in order to grow, a process that could take hours and left the animal extremely vulnerable throughout. Mia found herself particularly fascinated by a session dedicated entirely to how tarantulas sense their world, learning about the tiny sensory hairs covering their legs in far greater scientific detail than Julia had originally explained, understanding now how these creatures could detect the faintest vibrations of movement nearby without any ears at all. "It's basically their own radar system," Marcus explained during that particular session. "A remarkably sensitive detection system, developed entirely without anything resembling human senses." Remarkable, honestly, once you really think about it. Encouraged by this small success, Mia decided to enroll fully in the Society's 6-week beginner course, meeting weekly to learn proper enclosure setup, feeding routines, and essential safety practices. She also began seriously researching what it would actually require to keep her own tarantula in her apartment, eventually discovering that her landlord had no objections whatsoever, having never even considered that such a small, quiet animal might need special permission. By the 3rd week of her course, having gained considerably more confidence and practical knowledge, Mia decided to fully commit, ordering her first tarantula, a young Chilean rose hare recommended by Marcus, scheduled to arrive by carefully insulated shipping within a few weeks. The day her spider finally arrived felt simultaneously exciting and terrifying. Mia had spent the entire previous evening reviewing her care notes repeatedly, unable to sleep properly, checking the delivery tracking obsessively to ensure the small package would arrive safely and on schedule. Marcus, generous with his time even outside official course sessions, personally helped Mia set up her new enclosure, patiently guiding her through every careful step of the setup process. The small ventilated container holding her new tarantula arrived early that afternoon, completely still and silent inside, a stillness that somehow made Mia's stomach tighten just as nervously as the buzzing bee box in Julia's stories once had. When Marcus finally showed up, calm and reassuring as always, Mia felt her anxiety settle somewhat, grateful for his steady presence throughout the unfamiliar process. "Remember, slow, gentle movements," Marcus reminded her repeatedly as they worked. "Tarantulas respond to sudden motion, not sound. If you move calmly, she'll generally stay calm too." Despite Marcus's calming presence, Mia's hands still shook considerably during the transfer into the new enclosure, though she managed to complete each step successfully under his careful guidance. When the tarantula finally settled into a corner of her new terrarium, tucking herself beneath a piece of curved cork bark, Mia watched with a mixture of pride and lingering nervousness at the small creature now living just a few feet from her bed. "Congratulations," Marcus said warmly, packing away his tools. "You're officially a keeper now." The following weeks brought a steep learning curve for Mia. She checked on her tarantula, whom she eventually named Autumn for the warm color of her legs, almost daily after work, initially checking anxiously for any signs of problems, gradually developing a genuine routine and comfort around her quiet new roommate. She kept a detailed journal, following Marcus's strong recommendation, recording her observations about feeding, webbing, and any concerns that arose along the way. During her 4th week as a keeper, Mia experienced her first genuine crisis. Checking on Autumn one evening, she noticed the tarantula lying completely still on her back, legs curled inward, showing no response whatsoever to gentle taps on the glass. Alarmed, convinced something had gone terribly wrong, she immediately called Marcus for advice. "Don't panic, that's actually a really good sign," Marcus explained calmly over the phone. "She's positioning herself for a molt. Lying on her back like that means she's about to shed her old exoskeleton. Completely normal, though I understand it's alarming when you're not expecting it." Reassured by Marcus's explanation, though still slightly shaken by the experience, Mia decided to leave Autumn completely undisturbed for the next 2 days, watching from a respectful distance as the molting process slowly unfolded, learning firsthand an important lesson about reading her tarantula's behavior and adjusting her own actions accordingly, rather than assuming the worst whenever something looked unfamiliar. As spring progressed into early summer, Mia's confidence grew steadily alongside Autumn, who herself grew remarkably, emerging from each molt noticeably larger, her new exoskeleton richer and more vividly colored than before. However, during a routine feeding in early June, Mia noticed something concerning while checking the enclosure closely. Autumn had refused 3 feedings in a row, remaining motionless in her burrow entrance, something Marcus's course had briefly covered but Mia hadn't expected to actually encounter so soon. Consulting her course materials nervously, she suspected either pre-molt fasting or, more worryingly, a possible parasite or illness, a serious concern capable of significantly weakening a tarantula if left unaddressed. She photographed the enclosure carefully and sent the images immediately to Marcus, anxiously awaiting his response. "Good catch, and good instinct checking so carefully," Marcus replied within the hour, genuinely impressed by her attentiveness. "Refusing food for a few weeks is actually completely normal before a molt. Nothing to worry about yet, but keep monitoring her the way you have been, and let me know if anything changes." Marcus guided Mia through the appropriate waiting period over the following days, teaching her how to properly distinguish normal pre-molt behavior from genuine warning signs, and how to adjust humidity and temperature slightly to support the process. The entire situation required considerable patience and precise attention to detail, quite different from the excitement of her earlier setup day, but Mia approached the challenge methodically, determined not to lose Autumn after everything invested so far. Within 3 weeks, Autumn completed a full, healthy molt, emerging from her old exoskeleton larger and glossier than ever, and resumed feeding normally within days. Mia felt a genuine surge of relief and pride handling her first serious health scare as a tarantula keeper. "You handled that exactly right," Marcus told her, genuinely pleased. "That's honestly one of the most important skills in this hobby, staying calm, watching closely, and not overreacting to normal behavior." She began noticing subtle changes in herself beyond simply gaining new knowledge. Her stress levels at work, previously a constant, exhausting presence, seemed to decrease considerably. She found herself looking forward to her quiet evening check-ins with Autumn, the methodical, calming nature of enclosure maintenance providing a genuine mental break from her otherwise hectic daily schedule. "You seem different lately," her coworker Priya observed during a team meeting in early June. "Calmer, somehow." "What changed?" "A spider, actually," Mia admitted, laughing slightly at how strange this explanation still sounded, even to herself. "I started keeping a tarantula at home." Priya, initially skeptical like most of Mia's colleagues, eventually asked to see the enclosure herself, genuinely curious after noticing Mia's positive transformation. Standing safely at a comfortable distance while Mia demonstrated a routine check-in, Priya watched with growing fascination as Mia calmly and confidently handled the feeding tongs, a stark contrast to the nervous, hesitant woman Priya remembered from just a few months earlier. "This is honestly amazing," Priya admitted afterward. "I never would have guessed you'd become this comfortable around something like that." Around midsummer, Mia faced her most significant challenge yet as a keeper. Autumn escaped from her enclosure during a routine cleaning, slipping through a small gap Mia hadn't noticed while the lid was briefly propped open. Returning to the room moments later with fresh water, Mia found the enclosure empty, the tarantula nowhere in sight. The realization stopped her completely in her tracks, her mind racing through every possible hiding place in her small apartment, a wave of panic she found simultaneously terrifying and, oddly, less overwhelming than she once would have expected from herself. She sent Julia a nervous text, half expecting mockery, but instead received calm, practical advice within minutes. Panic threatened to grip her, remembering none of the escape-specific guidance from her beginner course clearly enough to feel confident handling the situation alone. She called Marcus immediately, her voice noticeably shaky. "Don't panic," Marcus reassured her calmly. "Tarantulas that escape almost always hide somewhere close, dark, and quiet. She's not aggressive and has no reason to wander far. I can walk you through checking the usual spots, but honestly, you're in no danger searching for her." Marcus guided Mia step by step over the phone, suggesting she check beneath the couch, behind furniture along the walls, and near any warm, dark corners. After nearly 40 minutes of careful, methodical searching, Mia finally spotted Autumn tucked quietly behind a bookshelf, motionless and apparently unbothered by her brief adventure. Using a soft paintbrush and a plastic container, exactly as Marcus had instructed, Mia gently guided the tarantula back into a container and safely returned her to a properly secured enclosure. Though thoroughly exhausted and slightly shaken afterward, Mia felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment successfully handling her first major crisis, even if she hadn't managed it completely independently. "You handled that really well," Marcus told her afterward, genuinely impressed. "Most beginners panic considerably more than you did." "I definitely panicked," Mia said, laughing somewhat shakily. "I just hit it well over the phone." By late summer, Mia's hard work throughout the season culminated in a milestone she had been quietly hoping for since first bringing Autumn home. After her most recent molt, Autumn had grown large enough, and calm enough, that Marcus judged her ready for supervised handling sessions, something Mia had assumed would remain far too frightening to ever actually attempt. The first handling session took place on a quiet Saturday afternoon, Marcus again generously offering his guidance, walking Mia through the careful process of coaxing Autumn gently onto her open palm. Mia's hands trembled as she lowered them slowly toward the enclosure floor, every instinct from her childhood urging her to pull away, yet she held steady, exactly as Marcus calmly instructed. The moment Autumn's legs made contact with her skin, light and almost weightless, something shifted in Mia. The panic she had braced herself for simply didn't arrive. Instead, she felt only the strange, gentle sensation of tiny feet moving slowly across her palm, and a quiet, unexpected sense of calm settling over her. "I actually did this," Mia said, staring down at Autumn resting peacefully in her open hands. "From being terrified to this." She immediately called Julia, excitedly describing the entire experience, remembering gratefully how her friend's spare room visit months earlier had unknowingly started this entire unexpected journey. I told you, Julia said, laughing warmly over the phone. Once you understand them properly, it's impossible not to fall for the whole process. Mia also brought photos home during a visit to her parents the following weekend, curious how they would react given her childhood fear of spiders, a story her mother still occasionally brought up during family gatherings. Her mother examined the photos skeptically at first, clearly still picturing her young daughter screaming after that long-ago night with the curtain. "You, holding one?" "Voluntarily?" her mother said, genuinely astonished. "I never thought I'd see the day." "I was terrified too, honestly, when I started," Mia admitted, smiling. "But it's completely different once you actually understand them properly." Her father, always more adventurous than her mother, asked detailed questions throughout dinner, genuinely fascinated by Mia's description of the molting process and the escape story from earlier that summer. By the end of the visit, both parents had looked closely at the photos with genuine curiosity rather than discomfort, her mother even hesitantly agreeing to see the enclosure herself sometime, standing safely at a distance, of course. Inspired by her successful first season, Mia decided to share her unexpected new passion more broadly within her own community. She reached out to a local library, proposing a small educational event where children and curious adults could learn about tarantulas and misunderstood animals in a safe, supervised setting. The library enthusiastically supported the idea, and Mia organized a small afternoon event, inviting Marcus to help lead an educational session for approximately 20 curious attendees, including several nervous children initially peering cautiously from a safe distance, exactly as Mia herself once had. Marcus brought along a clear display terrarium, allowing visitors to safely watch a resident tarantula moving inside without any risk, a teaching tool Mia hadn't previously seen during her own beginner course. Children pressed their faces close to the glass, pointing excitedly at the shed exoskeleton Marcus kept on display, helping them understand exactly how molting worked. "Why does it look like there are two spiders?" one girl asked curiously, studying the display intently. "That's just her old skin," Marcus explained patiently. "She grew too big for it, so she left it behind and grew a brand new one underneath." Watching a young boy named Leo, no older than 7, gradually overcome his own initial fear throughout the session, eventually working up enough courage to watch Mia hold Autumn from just a few feet away, reminded Mia vividly of her own transformative experience months earlier at Julia's house. "Are you scared of her?" Leo asked Mia directly during the event, his small voice filled with genuine curiosity. "I used to be terrified," Mia admitted honestly. "Completely terrified. But once you understand them, that fear usually turns into something much better." By the event's conclusion, several attending families expressed genuine interest in potentially getting their own first tarantula, and Mia happily provided information about Marcus's beginner course, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction having potentially inspired others toward the same unexpected, transformative journey she herself had experienced. As autumn arrived, bringing cooler temperatures and a slower feeding schedule for Autumn, Mia reflected on her remarkable first year as a keeper. What began as a hesitant, fear-driven curiosity following a single visit to a friend's house had transformed into a genuine passion occupying a meaningful, cherished portion of her otherwise hectic city life. Her relationship with stress and anxiety, previously constant companions throughout her demanding career, had noticeably shifted throughout the year, her quiet evenings with Autumn providing consistent, reliable moments of calm reflection amid otherwise chaotic daily schedules. Colleagues at work continued noticing her calmer demeanor, several eventually asking for advice about developing their own stress-relieving hobbies outside their busy careers. The following spring, Mia expanded her small collection, adding a second tarantula with Marcus's continued mentorship and guidance, gradually transitioning from complete beginner toward genuine, confident expertise herself. Caring for 2 enclosures simultaneously taught her valuable new lessons about comparing behavior side by side, noticing how each animal developed its own subtle personality and rhythm despite following the same basic biological patterns. She began occasionally assisting Marcus during his own beginner workshops, sharing her personal journey with new, nervous students who reminded her vividly of her own uncertain beginnings. Standing before a new group of anxious beginners the following spring, Mia found herself genuinely enjoying the unexpected role of teacher, patiently answering the same nervous questions she herself had once asked, remembering clearly how much Marcus's patient guidance had meant to her during those early uncertain months. Fear usually comes from unfamiliarity, she found herself telling nervous newcomers, echoing Marcus's own words from her very first introductory session, now understanding their truth from genuine personal experience rather than simply repeating someone else's wisdom. Reflecting occasionally on her unexpected journey, Mia often thought back to that single, transformative weekend visiting Julia's house, remembering clearly her initial terror standing at the doorway of that spare room. She never could have imagined, during that fearful moment, that a small, quiet spider would eventually become such an unexpectedly meaningful, calming presence within her otherwise hectic city life. And that's the end of today's story, The Balcony Terrarium. I really love this story because it shows something meaningful. Sometimes the things that frighten us most initially hold unexpected gifts, if we're willing to approach them with curiosity instead of avoidance. Before you go, think about this. Is there something that once frightened you, that later became something you genuinely valued or even loved, once you truly understood it? Thank you so much for listening today. This has been Anna, and this is the podcast. See you in the next episode. Take care, and keep practicing your English.